I'm Campbell Brown.
And I'm Mark Halprin. With all due respect to Bernie Sanders, tonight we've got your best friend on the show.
Not you, little fella. We're talking about Jane.
Hello, hello. Let's get started by talking about another unpredictable creature who tweets, Donald J. Trump. FYI, later on the show, we're going to have the latest Bloomberg Politics Purple Strategies online poll that has some good data on how Donald Trump is doing amongst married women voters. But first, let's understand why Trump is deriding the complex rules by which Republicans and Democrats select their delegates. After a chaotic and Ted Cruz-friendly Colorado Republican State Convention on Saturday, Trump is trying to reverse the news cycle narrative that Cruz crusaders are outmaneuvering Trump's campaign in the hunt for delegates, even in places where Trump won the popular vote primary. Trump's rhetorical campaign follows the Democratic caucuses in Wyoming this weekend, where Bernie Sanders crushed Hillary Clinton in the popular vote, but walked away with the same number of delegates as his rival. Here's Donald Trump making the case for himself and for Sanders at a rally in Rochester, New York last night.
I watch Bernie. He wins. He keeps winning. And then I see he's got no chance. They always say he has no chance. Why doesn't he have a chance? Because the system is corrupt. And it's worse on the Republican side. Because I'm up millions of votes on Cruz. Millions. I don't mean like I'm up by 2 votes. I'm up millions and millions of votes. We're supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be, you vote and the vote means something. What they're doing, and whether it's me or whether it's Bernie Sanders, when I look at it and I see all these victories that I have, all these victories that he's got, and then you look at the establishment, and I want to tell you, it's a corrupt deal going on in this country.
Today, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Mr. Reince Priebus, defended his party's nomination process in an interview with the conservative radio host Mike Gallagher, saying, them's the rules, and that state conventions are totally fair. Campbell, is Donald Trump correct that the delegate selection process is unfair to him, to Bernie Sanders, and to the voters?
No, the rules are, in fact, the rules. And the fact that Trump's own children are not able to vote in the primary in New York demonstrates how unprepared they are, how little they know about the rules. You can't even get your own family registered in time. It's absurd. This is the way the process is designed to work. And the rules may be crazy in certain states, but they're not arbitrary. They were decided on by the party, or in many cases by the voters in those states. And that's part of a campaign process, being organized, learning the rules, and playing by the rules.
I agree in the end that the rules are the rules. But I think Trump is right. People would be shocked if they knew that there's not a great correlation between the voters voting, the popular vote, and who gets the delegates.
Well, look, Al Gore. Al Gore didn't won the popular vote. He didn't get the presidency. He accepted it because that was the rule.
And people are plenty critical of the Electoral College, although in that case, there's also the question of votes in Florida and whether more people went to the polls intending to vote for Al Gore. I think Trump is onto something here as a rhetorical point. I agree with you. They should understand the rules. They shouldn't whine about them. But I think he's onto something as a talking point to say Bernie Sanders and I are the outsiders. The insiders are fixing the game. He's exaggerating, to be sure, but I think he's striking quite a chord, and he's helping rally his supporters to come out in the polls in the states yet to vote.
But I also think the rules are designed this way in order to build consensus around the nominee.
Yeah, they're not totally irrational.
They're not, about getting the popular vote or increasing the popular vote. They're about getting the establishment people and the engaged party activists on board with one person. That's why they're written the way they are. That's the intent.
But the news organizations should stop reporting the popular vote as if that's who won, because it ain't.
It's true. Fair point. Okay. Since Passover is approaching, here's a question for avid TV watchers. Why was this Sunday different from all other Sundays? And the wise son answers, Donald Trump did not do a single Sunday show, not even C-SPAN's Newsmakers. For the first time all year that Trump, this is a Sunday where Trump hasn't phoned in or taped a Sunday interview. But wait, there's more. Trump gathered the press following him on Saturdays so they could watch him tour the 9/11 Memorial Museum here in New York City. But afterwards, he did not take a single question. Mark, Trump did do a phoner into Fox News this morning. That's a Trump classic, of course. But is doing less media, as he appears to be doing, good for his chances?
I never want to argue in favor of a candidate talking to the press less, because I like that as a reporter. But I think Trump is smart to play with the supply and demand a little bit here. When he does lots, reporters tend to play off of each other. It tends to create a dynamic that hasn't been good for him. I think if he picks his spots more, does more local press, which he's doing below the radar, he does local TV sometimes without telling the national press, I think he's in a better position for himself to control the message more than he has been.
Well, I think just because he's doing less media doesn't mean he's getting less media. I mean, the cable channels are still taking his press conferences, his rallies live.
Right.
He has basically taken over the media in this campaign. They have given up editorial control. He said, you know, I'm not going to do a sit-down interview. I'll only do phoners. They take phoners.
Howard Stern
I'm not
is no longer
going
the
to
king of all
engage with
media.
you. Take my rallies if you
Trump.
want me. They take his rallies. So it has been a testament to Trump's talent and finesse and brilliance, how he has manipulated the media into totally giving up editorial control. So maybe he's doing less, but it doesn't mean he's getting less, and it's a great move for him.
He does one Sunday show interview, everybody covers it. He doesn't need to do more.
Totally. Well, lately, Ted Cruz has exhibited a good quality that might make for a good middle manager at Staples, and that is delegating. Cruz is scoring delegates in Colorado, North Dakota, and other states, but the road ahead for Cruz is clogged by states with voters who don't like him so much. The next 6 primary contests are in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states, including New York, where a new NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll shows Cruz in 3rd place with 18% of the vote. Cruz doesn't return to a more friendly stretch of the primary calendar until Indiana, and that's on May 3rd. Mark, Cruz is in California campaigning today. Is he going to pay a price if he finishes 3rd in these northeastern states?
I think he will in 2 ways. One is he needs to keep accumulating delegates. He needs to get close enough to Trump so he's got within hailing distance to win on a 3rd ballot. And 2, I think his argument to get Kasich out of the race really diminishes if he cannot finish 2nd. We got a long stretch now. We got like a month where there's only northeastern states. Much better off for him if he can somehow surge here and prove that he can compete in these northeastern states, which means to some extent showing he can compete for more moderate voters, which he needs to do to have that general election argument.
But does any of this even matter if for Cruz at this stage, it's just about getting to an open convention? You're not going to win outright, right? So he's just trying to keep Trump from getting to that magic number.
I think the danger for Cruz is that, yes, that's the main goal, but the danger for him is if it's the only way he can win when he gets the convention, he's got to have enough delegates and enough of a general election argument that he becomes the alternative. If Trump fails on the 1st ballot, Cruz needs to win on the 2nd or 3rd. If Cruz hasn't won by the 2nd, he probably can't win because too many of the delegates are still bound to vote on a 2nd ballot for Trump. If he can't win on that 3rd ballot, I don't know that he can win on the 4th ballot. He might be able to, but he's got to accumulate as much as he can. A lot of delegates at stake in these northeastern contests. And again, I'll say, he can't go around arguing that John Kasich is irrelevant if he can't beat John Kasich in all these contests, even though it's in the Northeast.
So I would argue now that Cruz, I think the Trump voters are the Trump voters, and they're not, Trump is not necessarily convincing new people. Those people aren't switching to Cruz. So for Cruz, it's about how do you expand turnout in some of these states? I mean, you look at a state like Maryland where maybe he does come in 3rd, but you've got a governor there who hates Trump, who has said he's not going to endorse, but maybe you can get him engaged more to ramp up turnout a little bit, to at least get that percentage or Trump's percentage down.
The other thing is Cruz has switched to more of an economic and jobs argument, which should have some appeal in the Northeast. This is a proving ground, a testing ground for it when he goes to California and other Western states. All right. It is America's favorite guessing game right now, if you're interested in politics at least. Who will be the Republican presidential nominee, and how will that person be selected? Over the past 2 days, I've gone on Twitter and done one of those unscientific Twitter polls with 4 options. 1, Trump will win the nomination before the convention. 2, Trump will win the nomination at the convention. 3, Ted Cruz will win the nomination. Or 4, some other outcome. More than 2,000 people have voted in my little unscientific poll on Twitter over the past 48 hours, and the tallies match exactly what my reporting finds. There is a total disparity of what people think is going to happen, with Trump winning at the convention being the scenario that is far and away the least predicted, and the other 3 are basically tied. Again, this is not scientific, Campbell, but now I'm going to ask you to vote. Of those 4 choices, which do you think at this point is the most likely outcome?
Well, first of all, I think it's more scientific than a lot of the polling that we've
Big
seen out
sample.
there. I was going to say, your
Couple
sample's
thousand
bigger than a lot of them.
And if they follow me on Twitter, they're people of refined taste.
There you go.
And discernment.
I think for Trump, he has to win on the first ballot. And don't you think that most of the Trump people that you're talking to have conceded as much? That
Even
is.
if they won't go all the way and say it's the only way to win, they certainly concede that things become a lot dicier. But I'm asking you the most likely, not to break down the possibilities.
I think that is not the most likely at this stage. I do think it goes to the second or third. I think it becomes about Cruz and his organizing.
So you think
ability,
Cruz at the convention is the most likely?
Right now, I think it is.
I still think Trump before the convention is the most likely. I'm not saying he's going to get it, but I think if he does really well in the Northeast, wins in Indiana, I think he can get there before the convention. Maybe not on the day of the California and New Jersey primaries, but there's this 6-week interval between the last day of the primaries and the convention. And I think if Trump is within 100, he can kind of shimmy his way to a majority before Cleveland.
And just very quick, the people who are trying to stop him will even, concede. We're talking about 20, 30 delegate difference here. This isn't about 100 delegates.
I think in 6 weeks, Trump can find them.
So coming up, what is the difference between classified and classified? President Obama explains it all and talks about Hillary Clinton's home email server. And then later, we sit down with Bernie Sanders' wife, Jane, here in the studio. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be talking to Jane Sanders, the wife of Bernie Sanders, in just a few moments. But first, Sanders' campaign has shifted its message about Hillary Clinton a little bit. Last week, Sanders was calling her unqualified to be president because her super PAC takes money from Wall Street and because of her past positions on the Iraq War and on trade. This week, he's using a different word. See if you can spot it.
She may have the experience to be president of the United States. No one can argue that. But in terms of a judgment, something is clearly lacking. Maybe her judgment is not quite as high as it should be. My point is, it is a question of judgment. It is a question of judgment.
I have my doubts about what kind of president she would make.
So, Mark, does Sanders step over the line in the realm of personal attacks when he questions Mrs. Clinton's judgment?
I don't think so. And the Clintons bristled at this today, but this is the essence of like what you want in a president, good judgment. He's pointed at some cases where he says she's exercised bad judgment and said he doesn't think that's someone who should be president. I think this, compared to saying she's disqualified, is right within bounds and the kind of argument I think all candidates should make.
And some of the Clinton people are still smarting over this, the not qualified comments because they think it could be used over and over in a general election. But to be complaining about this, I mean, welcome to politics. It's ridiculous. And is it any harsher than what Barack Obama said about Hillary Clinton in the last campaign and her 2008 over her Iraq vote? Any harsher than she was on him? I mean, this is a campaign. Grow up.
I also think, Bernie Sanders would have been better off making this argument right out of the gate after Wisconsin to take advantage of the momentum he had there, because his strongest case against her is on things like trade and Wall Street and the Iraq War, where he's able to say, this was my judgment, this was her judgment, what kind of judgment do you want in a president? For a lot of Democrats in New York State, all over this state, in the city and upstate and western parts of the state, those are big comparisons. She's got her own comparisons to make in her favor, but these are pretty strong ones in his favor.
And it feels like, a little bit of helicopter parenting by Democratic elites, sort of finger wagging. And the primaries are supposed to be boot camp and make you a better candidate.
Right. All right. Bernie Sanders made several stops around Gotham City this weekend, culminating with a big rally in front of the roller coaster at Coney Island yesterday. Polls, though, still show him lagging behind Clinton here in the Empire State by double digits. He's trailing Hillary Clinton in a new NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll that we mentioned earlier by 55 to 41%. That's out today. And his campaign is now saying that New York is not a must-win state for him, even though coming into this, Campbell, a lot of pundits said it was. So is the Sanders campaign right that he doesn't need to win New York to still be the nominee, or are they just a spin-in?
No, I think they're spinning. I think he has to win New York if he wants the nomination. But look, you probably know the math here as well as anyone. It feels like he needs a big wild card moment of some kind to change the dynamic, win New York or not win New York. Now what is sort of unexpected or we don't know is Hillary Clinton going to make another mistake or a big gaffe or something along the way? With the Clintons, you don't know. So even if he doesn't win New York, I don't see him getting out. I think it's going to be a long, hard slog for her no matter what.
If he wins New York by a lot, wins it by a little, loses it by a lot, loses it by a little, it doesn't much affect his chances of being the nominee. He still has to find a little bit of luck and a lot more delegates, but there are too many delegates in New York for him to just blithely say he doesn't need to win here. I think his chances of being the nominee don't go down appreciably if he doesn't win here, but he needs to win here. He needs to win here, and he needs to pick up delegates and get less than the delegates he gained. He needs the momentum of beating her. He needs the gee whiz factor of saying, I beat her in New York.
All right, now for those darn emails. President Obama sat down with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, where he was asked about that pesky FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's home server. First, Obama said he couldn't speak about the pending investigation and swore not to interfere. Then the president spoke about the pending investigation anyway and basically once again exonerated his party's likeliest presidential nominee. Take a listen.
Hillary Clinton was an outstanding Secretary of State. She would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy. There's classified and then there's classified. There's stuff that is really top secret, and there's stuff that you might not want on the transom or going out over the wire, but is basically stuff that you could get in open source.
But last October, you were prepared to say she hadn't jeopardized, and the question is, can you still say that?
I continue to believe that she has not jeopardized America's national security. Now, what I've also said is that, and she's acknowledged, that there's a carelessness in terms of managing emails that she has owned and she recognizes.
Today, during the White House press briefing, Press Secretary Josh Ernst defended his boss and how the president knows what he knows about the investigation.
The president has neither sought nor received a confidential briefing or confidential information about the ongoing investigation. The president's knowledge about this situation is based entirely on public reporting. This is one of the benefits of the approach that Secretary Clinton and her team have taken to dealing with this matter.
So, Mark, why is the president talking again about this email investigation?
Beats me. If he's only learning about this from public information or not, to say I'm going to want this investigation to be independent, but to then try to exonerate her as the person who's the president, who's overseeing the Justice Department but keeping arm's length, I don't get it. I mean, I don't know if he's trying to help her or what, but it makes no sense to me for him to be talking about this investigation. Just say it's an ongoing investigation. I got nothing to do with it. I have confidence in the Justice Department. Even testify to her honesty, but to talk about the specifics of the case, I do not get it.
I totally agree with you. I was stunned when I heard him say it. Any president would be expected to say it's an ongoing investigation. I can't comment on it. And then to say you don't want to influence what's going on, or you're not going to influence what's going on at the Justice Department or FBI, but be very overt about your views on this. I mean, there's no better way to influence the FBI or Justice Department.
If he's got no inside information, that he can't possibly exonerate her. He doesn't know what they found. They may have found more than what's been in the papers.
But it's a testament to how much she's struggling right now that he would feel the need to step in and protect his legacy, or they would want him to.
I guess so. All right. When we come back, Jane Sanders will tell us about her husband's latest plans, how he's going to win the Democratic nomination, after this word from our sponsors. Our guest tonight is Jane Sanders, the wife of Bernie Sanders, who dreams of being the next First Lady. So now we're going to talk more about the concrete jungle where dreams are made of. That's New York and the April 19th primary, week from tomorrow.
She rolled her eyes when you said dreams of being First Lady.
Sort of. How's New York going so far? This is like a rough and tough state with media in this city. How's it going?
It's our state, both of us born and bred here, and it's been amazing. It's been really good to be home. Going down to Coney Island yesterday, having so many people out there. South Bronx, 18,500 people out in the audience and at a rally. I mean, it's been fantastic.
So your husband has said, and the campaign has said, you may be from Vermont, but you're not intimidated by this. Is this intimidating at all to run here and with all the spotlight and glare?
Well, I mean, we're not intimidated by New York. We just love it. Now that you mention it, probably we should be about the election, but because Secretary Clinton represented New York, but it feels like home to me.
Just do this.
Do you think your husband has made this complaint that the process has been unfair, given the way the delegate, rules are designed in many cases? Do you agree with that? Do you think it's been unfair?
I don't think that he thought so much it was unfair. It does seem kind of silly that 30% of the votes that you need are they're superdelegates. They're people that are not the voters. So that doesn't seem quite right. I know that that's what the Republicans wish they had at this point in time. We just don't agree with the way that one person, one vote.
But what would you say to your grandkids? You say, hey, Grandpa won with Wyoming by 12 points and they got the same number of delegates. How does that work, Grandma? What would you say?
Yeah, it's every state has its own rules. I don't like how they figure it out, but it doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me. But those are the rules that were set before we entered, and those are the rules we're playing by.
So unlike Donald Trump, you wouldn't say these rules are corrupt or fixed or
No, everybody does
you.
their own way. It's kind of interesting to see that it's all different state by state. I'd like to see more of a federal election that you win a state and every state has the same requirements for registration. For instance, independents can't vote in New York, and we're building the Democratic Party, and yet we're keeping them out if last October they didn't decide to run to register as Democrats. That doesn't seem smart.
You mentioned the superdelegates and the role that they play, obviously. If you're trying to sway them and bring them over, what's your message to them? What do you say to them?
Well, I think the key is to look at who's the best candidate for the general election. I mean, Bernie wins, whoever the Democratic Party nominee is going to win the base of the party, the Democrats. But who wins the independents and who sways some of the Republicans? I think Bernie has done that throughout his whole career. He wins independents everywhere. In our own state of Vermont, in his last senatorial election, he got 25% of the Republicans because they say, we know you, we trust you, we might not agree with everything you're saying, but we know we can count on you to do what you say. So I think he's a much better candidate, even predicting it that way. But if you look at all the polls, he's doing much better against all the Republicans than Secretary Clinton is.
Okay, Jane Sanders, stand by. We're going to come back more with Jane Sanders of Vermont and New York right after this.
We are back with one of Bernie Sanders' closest advisors, and occasionally she's also his primary news source, like when she broke the news to him at a New York rally on Saturday that he had won the Wyoming caucuses. Jane Sanders, thank you for being here again.
Good to be here.
We were talking about that a little bit, Wyoming, and the differences on the delegate rules, and also about the superdelegates. But talk a little bit to us about your role in all of this. How you define it as someone who's campaigning for him. You're very involved, I know, in his ad making. How do you see your role in the campaign and what you're spending time on? Well,
there's about a half dozen of us that really work with Bernie on anything that is necessary, a strategic role. But it started with just buying the furniture for the office. Whatever needed to be done was done. And now I travel with him a lot, which has been really nice. And really just talking about strategy, scheduling, and television advertising.
So apparently there's one role that you have uniquely. You're the family CPA. You do the taxes.
Well, TurboTax.
Yeah, doing TurboTax. So here's a candidate who says, trust me, when I release my taxes, there'll be no problem.
Yeah.
But he won't say when he'll release them, how much he'll release, or what's in them.
And that's my fault. He said to me, we have to answer this. And I said, well, I was expecting that when they were due, we would be releasing them.
Right.
And
but how about the prior years?
Well, sure. I'll have to go back and find them, but yes.
Are they're not on file anywhere?
Yeah, they're on file, but we haven't been home for a month.
Right.
So 2 weeks ago, people asked, the Clinton campaign or somebody asked, and we said, oh, of course we'll release them, and we will.
And in full, not a summary, not individual pages,
Sure.
the whole thing.
Sure, no problem.
If Donald Trump or some other candidate said, trust me, I'll release them eventually, trust me, would you say, oh, that's fine, there's nothing in them, no problem? Or would you say, we really need to see those?
I would say, well, when they're due, I would expect them to come out. Now,
But
I
they're
have to
back
tell you,
years.
every other year, I ask for an extension, but this year, we knew I couldn't do that. So
you'll release how many years?
I don't know. How many do you want, Mark?
I think the Clintons have released 8. Or even more, but at least
Well,
8.
they've been in office all these years. They've done
Senator
it.
Sanders has been in the House and Senate for
Right, and we every election we've released them. So maybe that,
you'll release your whole returns, not just a summary.
We did in when he ran for election. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right, we look forward to that.
I'll release this year's as soon as they're due, and can I have time to go home?
Sure.
And
we'll
then
go with you
release
if you want.
future ones.
But
Good, come home.
But you're saying there's like nothing in them.
There's nothing. We're really pretty boring.
You have your Senate income. What else do you guys have?
Social Security. I sold my mom's condo at the beginning of the year. That was
But that's
about
a pretty simple return.
Yeah, pretty simple return.
But let me ask you about, this was more on the Republican side, a kerfuffle, or however you want to describe it, about the Melania Trump and Heidi Cruz that came out with the attention that was being paid to wives and spouses. Do you think that is fair? Are spouses fair game in this?
I don't think families are fair game. I think that spouses put themselves out there in a supportive role. We're not playing partisan politics. To criticize people as they did, as Trump did for Heidi Cruz, for her looks, that's ridiculous. First off, she's a very nice-looking woman. I mean, but beyond that, it's just not nice to take personal attacks against anybody, let alone the spouses. I think it's fine to ask questions of them. If we are here, you can ask questions.
You leaving for Italy with your husband on Thursday night?
Yeah.
So the New York primary is in 8 days. You're going to spend 2 days, which is like a quarter of the time that's left.
Actually, 1.5.
Okay.
We finish. We're leaving
Thursday right after the debate.
Right after the debate, and we're leaving
Saturday.
first thing Saturday morning.
Right.
And we'll have events on Saturday.
Right.
So, I mean, we're in New York. We've been in New York all this time, and we're going to continue through the election. We've been in New York a lot more than Secretary Clinton has with her fundraising trips everywhere, many different
Does anyone in the
states.
campaign think it's a bad use of time, or everyone thinks it's the right thing to do?
Everyone thinks it's the right thing to do.
And what will you do there?
Well, Bernie will be speaking at the invitation of the Vatican to talk about a moral economy. I mean, that's quite an invitation that you really do not want to reject. I mean, this is quite an honor, and it's something, that he feels very strongly. The Pope Francis is an excellent leader, and that the issues he talks about are very similar to the ones that Bernie talks about.
But you don't want my Rome restaurant recommendations because you're coming right back, is what you're saying.
Right.
All right. Next time you go, I'll give them to you. Bill Clinton the other day made some remarks about when he was being heckled by some Black Lives Matter folks. And the press jumped on one thing he said. The next day he said, he's tempted to apologize. That's a paraphrase. Do you think in our politics, for yourself, for your husband, for the other candidates and spouses, that the press and political opponents sees on one word or one phrase too often, rather than looking at the totality of what's said? Is that a fair criticism of the political process, do you think?
I would definitely say that.
Yeah.
It's crazy that the story is the gaffe. The story is the mistake.
Right.
It's not what the intent was.
Right.
And I think Bill Clinton probably regrets how he handled that questioner, but he was speaking about other things as well.
I would say that you're right, but I'd also say that your campaign occasionally has done that to your political opponent. Is that a fair thing to say, that you sometimes will take one thing Secretary Clinton says and kind of exacerbate or exaggerate its impact? Is that?
I don't know that that's true, Mark. I think that is politics today. I know I always try to say no. What did she mean? What was the context? And when it fits with the overall the overall image that Hillary Clinton is trying to project or doesn't fit with it, and then we might put it out there. But it's always in a larger
Overall
context.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll come up with
Not
some
a mistake.
examples. Okay.
I mean, you might not want to go here. It may be premature, but there are a lot of people in the pundit world who say if he doesn't win in New York, it's over for Sanders, and he shouldn't go on at that point.
Well,
I mean, how do you think about this over the long term? Is this a must-win?
No, and that's the question that's been asked in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in Ohio, and everywhere. So everybody keeps on thinking that, well, he can't make it. You have to remember, when he started, nobody took him seriously. The media didn't cover him all throughout 2015, and now they're starting to, and he's won 8 out of the 9 last contests. So I think that he needs to do well in New York, and I think that if he does well in New York, which is his opponent's state that she represented, that says a lot. I think what we're looking at is momentum, and we're looking at how people are feeling about him. The more, we're in an enviable position, I think. The more people hear about Bernie, the more they know about him, the more they like him. That's a really good place to be. It's unfortunate they didn't know more about him before. And we didn't decide to run until May, or April, I guess.
Superdelegates from, say, Massachusetts. The state secretary Clinton won narrowly, but she won. Should they be free to support Bernie Sanders and not go along with their the voters in their state?
My feeling is with 30% of the votes that you need, that they're superdelegates, most of them have been elected to represent their state. So I would think that those representing their state would look to, when you have a very large margin, 2/3 or more, that I would think that would be a given. I know that's how I'd comport myself if I were elected.
If the state's close, superdelegates should be free to vote either way, but it's a wide margin.
Superdelegates have to use their judgment. That's why they're superdelegates. That was the thinking, that they would be able to use their judgment and make some decisions.
Even use their judgment. If they say, I think Bernie Sanders is better than Hillary Clinton, even though my state voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton, you think they should support Bernie Sanders and not go with the overwhelming majority of their voters?
No, I think they should go with the majority of their voters.
They should.
I think so.
And so not use their judgment, but follow their
But I mean, I think, as I said, the majority, a big majority, but a small majority. I mean, we've tied many
So if it's close, they should use their judgment. But if it's a big margin, they should vote with the people.
I think they'll do whatever they want to do, and I'm not here to direct them. But it seems fairer, put it that way. It seems fairer to have people, when Bernie wins 70, 80% of the vote in elections, that the superdelegates follow there.
We didn't get to talk about Hamilton, but we're going to have you back and maybe sing.
It was great. No, I won't
Everybody
sing.
should go. Better than cats. Jane Sanders says, thank you very much. You're nice to come back. Always great to see you. Good luck.
Thanks.
On the trail. Up next. That's you. Go.
Up next, Republican mega strategist Al Cardenas joins us right after this.
Joining us now, the former chairman of the Florida Republican Party, a former senior advisor to Jeb Bush's presidential campaign, and a man we like to talk to. Al Cardenas. He's currently not supporting any of the 3 remaining candidates. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Hey, great to be with you as always.
Appraise the state of your presidential nomination fight right now. Where does it stand?
Well, I think, I'll be very surprised if Donald Trump doesn't fall short by 100, maybe 80 delegates. I think maybe Ted Cruz's shot is at getting within 200. And, they're going to be between 200 and 300 delegates, either because they're released by the folks that they're there to represent, or because they're RNC members or senators. And they could well tilt this thing before you walk into the convention hall. And so it's up to either of those candidates to do that. But as you know, everybody's getting every individual delegate's information, who they like to fish with, they like golf. Sometimes if they like golf, they'll be called by a professional who might be supporting a particular candidate. This thing gets very personal, very specific, and obviously these delegates are worth their weight in gold.
So is that really happening right now with the delegates? I mean, that sort of deal-making and lobbying at that sort of granular level?
I believe that you'll see that as inevitable. Right now, I think 2/3 of the campaigns are concentrating on adding delegates. And then there's another whole crew that's there to do the intel work, find out who each delegate is, how strongly they feel about the process, where they're there really because of the candidate or because their friends selected them. And as you know, I would say 30–40% of those who are going to be delegates are not there because they were enthusiastic followers of the person they're there to represent, but they're there because they're donors or elected officials or party regulars. And they'll do what they need to do. They'll respect the rules. But at the end of the day, they'll vote with their heart once those responsibilities are over. And everybody needs to know where they're going to be.
You've been to a lot of conventions. I know it's hard to generalize, but we debate this all the time. Do you think the delegates care about electability, that they're going to look at the possible nominees and say, I want this person because I think this person can win a general election?
If you are really for a particular candidate, it doesn't matter what the polls say. You're not there intellectually. Your heart's taking you there. And your heart says that candidate's going to win, and we'll figure out the path to get there. If you're a party regular, you're an elected official, you're going to be much more pragmatic. And yes, you're going to be looking at the polls, and they should be worried. The polls right now are not being very kind to our two likely nominees.
So how do you weight that? How many people are there because of their heart, and how many people are there because they're elected officials or donors, or they're thinking like perhaps you?
Boy, you could throw all traditional outlooks out the window in this election cycle, because the two candidates who are likely to, one of the two who are likely to be our nominees, are not ones who have a long track record of support. I mean, this is not a Reagan, a Bush, even a Bob Dole, people who've had a history in the party. And you know what's what? It's going to be, the first time since Eisenhower, other than George Bush Jr., where you're going to elect someone who hasn't been a nominee or hasn't been in the process once before. Remember, just about every Republican nominee has run once before, and we've had a chance to know about them. This time, people are even getting to know some of these candidates. I mean, there are people wondering, geez, Donald Trump really like this or like that? And as Ted Cruz has a soft spot in his heart, people are literally trying to figure these candidates are as we speak.
So why hasn't the establishment crowd rallied around Kasich more? If that's the case, if they're not falling in love, they're still trying to figure out Cruz, figure out Trump. Why hasn't Kasich been the alternative?
Listen, love is a two-way street. Donald Trump, a couple of weeks ago, you would think by now where he is, he'd be kind of rounding up the troops, putting out some strong messages about wanting to unite the party. What does he say? He says, well, I don't want Jeb Bush's support. I don't want support from Mitt Romney. He is purposely shunning the potential support of others to bring the party together. He's doing that, I think, because he believes at this point in time, the only recourse he has is to take control of the party, take control of the nomination, and win on his own terms. I don't believe Donald Trump thinks that he can put the toothpaste back in the tube after the campaign he's run.
Al, thank you very much.
Thanks
Al
for
Parnas,
having
former
me.
party chairman and a very smart man about pretty much everything. Up next, our new Bloomberg Politics online poll about what married women think regarding Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and the other candidates. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio in the nation's capital at Bloomberg 99.1 FM on the radio. We'll be right back. Hot off the electronic press, our new Bloomberg Politics online poll conducted by our friends at Purple Strategies. We call it a Purple Slice Survey because it looks at one important demographic for the general election, that is married women. Mitt Romney won that important group of voters in 2012, according to the exit polls. This year, our online poll shows Republican married women favor Donald Trump over Ted Cruz, 37% to 32%. But in a general election, Trump, Cruz, and Hillary Clinton all have extremely high unfavorable numbers with that group. Joining us now from our Washington bureau to explain the poll further is the Purple Strategy CEO and Democratic thought influencer. That's what the teleprompter says, Steve McMahon. Steve, first just talk about the methodology of how you all are doing these slice polls for us.
Well, they're online surveys, as you mentioned, and we're taking a quick look Al Hunt had the brilliant idea, and it really was a very smart idea, to take a look at some of the slices of the electorate that are going to make a big difference in this election, ultimately determine the outcome, and take a look at how they're performing this year as opposed to 4 years ago. And you've already given the headline. Among married women who Mitt Romney carried by 7 points 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton has a 12-point lead over Donald Trump, which represents a 19-point swing in the direction of Democrats. So go down the ballot if you're if you're looking at Senate races or House races, and see what happens when you put a 19-point swing in there. It's not going to be a pretty picture for Republicans if this slice holds the way it is.
So was that the most surprising thing for you? The sort of good news here, I guess, for Hillary Clinton?
It's very good news. Mark mentioned a moment ago, Campbell, that none of these candidates is particularly popular on their own, standing alone. But in comparison to another candidate, Hillary Clinton looks a lot more popular and a lot more appealing to a group that went for Mitt Romney by 7 points 4 years ago. If I were in the Clinton campaign tonight looking at these numbers, I'd be very, very happy.
Is there anything in this, if you're in the Trump campaign tonight, you'd look at the numbers and say that's some good news?
Well, Donald Trump leads in areas where you would expect him to lead. They're not necessarily partisan areas. So, for instance, if you ask who's going to do a better job changing Washington, Donald Trump has a lead among these married women over Hillary Clinton there. If you ask who represents, who's going to bring new ideas to Washington, Donald Trump has a lead. And if you ask who's going to be better at creating jobs in America, Donald Trump's business experience really helps him there. On the other side, though, if you ask who's ready day one to be president, Hillary Clinton wins that. If you ask who has the temperament to be president, which I think is something that you're going to see debated, discussed, and voters focusing on a little bit more, Hillary Clinton has a lead there. And then if you ask, who's going to be a better role model for our children, obviously, Donald Trump doesn't win that. Hillary Clinton does. And, all those things are, I think, good news for the Clinton camp.
Steve, I know you asked about Trump's position on abortion. Tell us what people said about that.
It's interesting. First of all, people don't really understand what his position is as much as they think his position is not the same as theirs. 50% of women reported, these married women that were the purple slice that we looked at, 50% reported that his position on abortion is not the same as theirs. Another 19%, I think, correctly identified his position, and 31% were unsure. So, notwithstanding all the attention that Donald Trump's abortion answer, or his 4 or 5 abortion answers last week got, most voters haven't really received the information. They kind of think he's not standing where they are, which is a little bit of a problem for him. They're not really sure where he stands, with the exception of a minority of women who actually do understand where he is.
And Steve,
I still don't.
We'll do more of these slice polls, but it's safe to say, isn't it, that you can slice and dice the electorate in a number of ways to figure out a way Republicans might be able to win a majority of the popular vote. But if they don't do better than this survey suggests with married women, there's no way for them to do it, right?
That's exactly right, Mark. You can look at these demographics and you can compare how the candidates today are doing relative to how the exit polls showed the candidates to have done 4 years ago. And in this case, it's a 19-point swing in Democrats' direction, which, again, if I were Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan, I'd be really pretty concerned, because regardless of how Donald Trump does, whether he wins or doesn't win, if these numbers hold among married women, you've got a down ballot, really a down ballot debacle if you're a Republican.
Okay, Steve McMahon in Washington, thanks very much. Again, full write-up of this slice poll from Purple Strategies on our website right now, BloombergPolitics.com. Great data to look at for this extraordinarily important group of voters. And Campbell and I will be right back. Our thanks to Jane Sanders, Al Cardenas, and Steve McMahon for joining us, as well as to our friends, the birds, for joining us. Check out,
the birds,
as we said before, our poll with Purple Strategies. The latest Slice poll is on there now. Great look at married women. Coming up on Bloomberg Television, Emily Chang speaks to the founder of Vayner Media Founder. Campbell, New York primary 1 week away. Anybody been campaigning in your neighborhood?
No.
No?
No.
They're not going for the all-important downtown vote.
No, let's see. The Donald Trump vote in Tribeca, the Ted Cruz vote in Tribeca.
Relatively limited. Very limited. All right, John will be back tomorrow. We thank Campbell for joining us. We thank these pesky birds for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.
Sayonara.